It's Brainwash with Dr. Tom and Guitar Picks with Rob Seals. REM. Boxcars.
All right, I picked obscure early REM because one of the bands I was in high school, our drummer was just impossibly hip and cool, and the rest of us were impossibly not. And Tim was a really fine drummer, but somehow he was into REM long before they broke. And I think he had an older sister in college in Athens, Georgia, and so we would get these like bootleg tapes of REM and start learning the songs. And Boxcar, A Carnival of Sorts, was a song from their first EP called Chronic Town, long before they had hit the airwaves. But one of the things that I loved about Pete Buck in the early days was all my guitar heroes to this point were just luminaries, and nothing coming out of my guitar really sounded like any of these people. I mean, you could learn the lick all you wanted, but it's just like learning a big word. It comes out of your mouth clanging when you're 13 years old. And the guitar in Peter Buck's hands, and this is not a slam at all, he sounded like sort of everyman guitar player. His riff sounded like the kind of things that you and your buddies would make up if you were kind of fooling around with a guitar on a Wednesday afternoon. There was a simplicity and a directness and this jangling of open strings. I mean, a lick like that, that sounds like one of the first things you would learn. It doesn't sound too different from like Secret Agent Man or something like that. And so the idea that he could combine sort of an acoustic guitar sensibility with the jangly attitude, sort of a Byrds-like electric guitar, there was a real appeal to that. And for me, he was sort of an everyman guitar hero, and he was actually a guitar hero you could imagine yourself being. And I don't think that's a backhanded compliment. I think he found a style that was appropriate for him, and I think part of the reason Michael Stipe evolved into the singer and songwriter he did is that you've got a very lyrical guitar underneath the melody, and eventually the mumblings of Stipe had to turn into words because those guitar lines were just begging for it.
It's Brainwash with Dr. Tom and Guitar Picks with Rob Seals. We've asked Rob to select 20 influence songs. We've already discussed 11. We have the final 9 to go, beginning with James Taylor, Sweet Baby James.
Wow. James Taylor. I think James Taylor's curse is that he's such a wonderful songwriter and singer that people don't appreciate him as a guitar player. Mm-hmm. But you cannot go to an open mic night in the United States of America and not hear somebody take a D chord and do something like that to it, which honestly comes from James Taylor. There's some licks like that are just so signature, and I think for him, just as effortless as breathing. It's sort of how he recycles his D's and his A's. But those have just kind of worked their way into the unconsciousness of the acoustic guitar player, and you honestly can't find someone playing an acoustic guitar who doesn't at some point do some variation of those kind of pull-offs. For me, I came to James Taylor very late in the game in some regards, in that I was very close-minded as a music listener early on. If it didn't just rock, I did not want to have anything to do with it. And it's like no hablo. Nothing else spoken here. And I mentioned when I went away to college, I didn't bring my electric guitar, and so I just brought an acoustic, not with the idea that I would be playing acoustic all the time, but just that for efficiency and that sort of thing initially. But because it wasn't as much fun to learn a Rat song on on an acoustic guitar, I sort of found my way into the James Taylors and the Paul Simons of the world. And but when I found the song "Sweet Baby James," something really clicked for me, in that I think that's a song in which he sings about precisely what it is, that indescribable thing about music that necessarily calls music forth from you, why you make music in the first place. And that's one of those just great waltzes that's really about why you make music in the first place. And I remember the first time I heard it, I just wept because I got it. And I think sometimes we don't understand what we've been thinking and feeling until someone else expresses it more articulately for us. And that very, very simple song about a cowboy out on the plain, kind of a far from home, thinking about women and glasses of beer. He's in the end singing. It works just fine for me, he says, and I think that's the truth. And when I heard that, I mean, it's not the most intricate of his songs. I almost chose a song like "Only a Dream in Rio" from the "That's Why I'm Here" record, because the harmonically it's a lot closer to the kind of things that I like to do. These moves from the 3 minor up to the 6 minor, and this sort of progressions where he's that kind of movement is something that really pleases my ear, and a lot of his songs will do that. But this Sweet Baby James has just got that just beautiful waltz to it, and that lyric that I just can't escape. That's why we do it.
It's Brainwash with Dr. Tom and Guitar Picks with Rob Seals. Paul Simon, Homeward Bound.
Paul Simon. Golly, how do you choose a Paul Simon or a Simon and Garfunkel song? I think I just love the circular nature of this song, and that intro riff is so nice. But more than anything, I think one of the lasting legacies for me about Paul Simon, I didn't really understand it at the time, was he has this wonderful poetic sensibility. He's such a great writer, but he has a very conversational style to the delivery of his lines. And as I began to grow as a songwriter, I think I necessarily started writing these sort of word salad kind of songs. The idea would sometimes take precedence over the melody, and when at my best, I think I'm approaching Paul Simon's balance of the poetic narrative that's never at the expense of the melody. And I think he's just so great at that. And this is just it's a song about the road, and it's a song about performing and touring, and all the performing musicians out there can relate to that feeling of being in another town, and each town looks the same to me.
Of course, he'd said that he'd written songs that he wished he'd never had, like "What Feeling Groovy." Are there songs that you've written that you wish you never had written?
Of course. And the crazy thing, there's a story about the composer Brahms. Supposedly he would wake up in the morning and he would compose and compose and compose, and then he would take all of that writing that he had done and put it in the fire and start the fire for the day. And that's how he would warm the place up to practice. And the lesson in that, I think, is that a lot of the great writers like Paul Simon and Sting supposedly will really punch in the morning and bang out hours and hours of writing and write just many, many, many dreadful songs that we'll never get to hear, at least if they have their way. And for them, it's all about sort of doing the intellectual push-ups to get those muscles ready so that when true inspiration strikes, they can do something with it. Yes, I've written songs, sadly, that people have heard, probably that I recorded. I think we all do. I think as we're trying on our voices as writers and players and performers, we're bound to misstep a few times. I was thinking about the, all that hoo-ha at the Super Bowl with the wardrobe malfunction. And, for me, wardrobe malfunction was how I dressed in the 80s. And I think we, as far as my song catalog is concerned, I've probably got a few wardrobe malfunctions in there too. But I think if we're lucky, either we get a sense of what songs work and which ones don't, or someone close to us sort of says, you know what, not so much. That one. So yeah, absolutely. Were you trying to hear one of those songs? Is that what you're trying to do?
No, unless you actually.
I will play you the first song I ever wrote.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I wrote songs long before I played guitar, and so this is a song that I didn't write on the guitar, and of course my voice hadn't changed. I was 10 years old, but I'll play it in the post-pubescent guitar version. But it's called Jungle Safari. I'll just give you a verse, and it had a very catchy chorus, which you can sing at home if you choose. But anyway, it went something like this. Well, the tiger and the lion, they can keep on crying, 'cause I ain't gonna let them in. They can go back home to where they roam. I guess they call that their den. Now, I was 10 years old. Let's spread it. It's a jungle safari. Here comes the hook. Jungle safari. Okay, anyway, you get the point.
All right.
I was a hook-driven kid then. But so yeah, that was probably a song I shouldn't have played.